you, when we sent out the notification to submit your question, we received over 52 questions. And some of them are still coming in. But we had to stop at some point. And so the candidates are aware of the categories. We're going to have some questions. We're going to get this show on the road. But before I do that, I want to introduce our MC and our host. Let me tell you about this talented journalist and media expert. And he is an award-winning debate producer. And he has 3 Emmys. I wanted him to bring them so you guys can touch him and see them. I didn't have a showcase for you today, but he'll talk to you all about it. He is a media analyst, and his role today is to keep us on track. Because with that many questions, we've been able to narrow it down. We want to make sure that we get through all the questions because we don't want to leave any question on the floor. But the questions came from you. And we have 2 talented moderators who will be introduced to you shortly who will ask those questions. And you guys will be timed, and then you will respond, and then it's in your hands. So Dominic, please join us up.
It's absolutely my pleasure to be a part of this event tonight. I want to thank Senator Ron Fields and everybody associated with the Community College of Aurora that made this possible. As the Senator kindly said, I'm here to keep us on track, and I intend to do so. So let me first of all introduce the wonderful moderators who will be asking questions for our debate tonight. Now, first of all, we have Whitney Traylor. He is a legal analyst with 9 News and an attorney in Denver. And of course, I want to introduce our candidates who are going to join us today. I first want to introduce Bill Weiser, the current Attorney General of Colorado. And Tom Kilner, the current District Attorney in the 18th Judicial District.
All right.
I am gratified that so many people are joining us both here in person and online. But I will ask you just one more time to thank both our candidates because then we will remain silent for the rest of the debate so we can pay our respect for what they have to say because we're all here to hear what they have to say, not to each other. As interesting as some of you may very well be, we're here to listen to them. So please, one more time, help me welcome both of our candidates. Ground rules. We're going to have some opening and closing statements, the order of which will determined via coin flip before the event. We'll also have 5 different categories of questions asked by our moderators. And after that, I will be then taking care of timing. Being a forum, we're not going to have the candidates asking questions back and forth, but if there's a need for rebuttal, I'll help manage that, making sure that we have equal time offered to both our candidates. A quick reminder that this race will be decided by all of you on November 8th. That is an important date for all of us to remember. These are 2 of the 3 candidates on the official ballot. There's a Libertarian candidate on the ballot, William Robinson. The invitation was not processed at the time through the Libertarian Party, so these are the candidates joining us this morning. So, without any further ado, let's get to it. We have, as we mentioned, Senator Fields, over 50 questions brought in by the community. We will not be getting to 50 questions tonight. We only have over to 7:30 and we will not be going late. But we will get straight into our opening statements via the coin flip before the program. Mr. Kilner will be offering the first 3-minute opening statement. Mr. Kilner, the floor is yours.
All right. I feel like I should ask this person. Can I stray from the podium?
As long as the microphone's closed, so everyone online can hear you.
Can you hear me in the back? Great. Kind of? How about now?
Yeah,
All right. Says it's on.
We'll adjust volume as the meeting goes on.
All right. Well, first things first, I just want to say once again, thank you to the Community College of Aurora for hosting this debate, or forum, I should say, and particularly thank you to Senator Rhonda Fields. She reached out to me and said, would you be willing to do this? And I know there are a lot of candidates out there from both sides of the aisle who are not really willing to get together and talk about what their positions are and let you all see and hear the differences between the candidates. So, Senator Fields, we've been in a bunch of fights on criminal justice before. You've always been a strong advocate for victims. Thank you so much for hosting me tonight. I'd like to give Senator Fields another big round of applause. It's great to see our Chief of Police, Dan Oates, back in action. Thank you for being here. It's also great to see some of our amazing city council people from Aurora here in attendance tonight. For those that don't know me, my name is John Kellner. I'm the Republican candidate for Attorney General. I feel like I should tell you a little about who I am and how I ended up here tonight. I grew up in a military family. My father served on active duty in the Marine Corps for about 28 years. So we bounced around the country and overseas and kind of back again. And as a young person, I really got to appreciate what we have in this great country of ours. But as a young man in college, I was going to college in Florida, don't hold it against me, and I saw the towers fall. I remember 9/11 very vividly, and I knew it was my time to serve as well. And so I became a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps when I graduated, and the Marine Corps said, you know, it'd be great for you young men, law school. And I got to go to CU Boulder, and I had this amazing opportunity there, and frankly life-changing. I met my now wife on day one of law school. We've got two great kids, 8 and 10 years old, that go to public school in our community. I spent 5 years on active duty in the Marine Corps as a judge advocate, doing all kinds of different legal work, a lot of it as a prosecutor. And when I was getting back from Afghanistan in late 2010, I was wondering, what am I going to do when I transition to civilian life? And I knew I wanted to continue to serve, and I wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to seek justice for victims, and that's what I did. I joined the Boulder DA's office, and later joined the 18th Judicial District in 2013 on day one of George Bracco's administration. And as somebody who's worked in this community, in the 18th Judicial District, I am passionate about seeking justice for victims in this community. Because the 18th Judicial District, you guys know, it covers Arapahoe, Douglas, Elbert, and Lincoln. It's over 1.1 million Coloradans that I am now responsible as the DA for seeking justice for them. I have fought in the courtroom day in and day out for victims of crime in Aurora who've suffered from gun violence and gang violence and drugs. And when I had the opportunity to be honored to be the district attorney, to be elected to this post, I looked around and I want to solve the crime problems that they're facing. And it became very clear to me that it's not something to be done simply in our judicial district. That so many of the causes of the crime wave that we're dealing with are brought on by statewide laws and policies, many of which my opponent has backed along the way. And as district attorney, he needs me to wrap up. That's great. 3 minutes goes by really fast when you're a lawyer. I am committed to seeking justice for everyone. I am committed to seeing our state turn the tide on this crime wave, and that is why I am running for Attorney General. Thank you so much.
Mr. Weiser, the floor is yours for freedom.
Thank you very much. And let me join in thanking the great Senator Rhonda Fields. Appreciate it, Rhonda. You too, Aisha. You guys I know are a great team. And the team of leaders here in Aurora mean a lot to me. I come to you here as a first-generation American, like a lot of people in Aurora. And I recognize this nation's opportunity, a commitment to freedom and opportunity for all, allowing me to serve as a law clerk, the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the advisor of Barack Obama in the White House. Of living the American dream. And I have great respect for people like John who served in the military, because the U.S. Army liberated my mom and my grandmother after they survived the Holocaust. And they came to this nation and were welcomed. And that's what I want from Colorado, from the United States of America. And when I look around, there's a lot of work to do. In our office, as your Attorney General, I'm committed to that work. Just last week, I announced a verdict of 18 years from someone who was preying on Asian business owners who were seeking to live that American dream in Fort Collins, stealing from them during the day. The week before that, I was in the San Luis Valley, standing up for victims, enforcing for the first time ever the Victims' Rights Act. And we're now protecting victims and working to get that office on sound footing. And as I stand here in Aurora, and I think about victims, I think about gun violence, and many who've been touched. And I think the work that so many have done, Moms Demand Action, Senator Fields and others, fighting for common sense gun laws, like a large magazine capacity ban now being challenged in the courts, like a red flag law that many of us fought for. I'm committed to that work and will remain all in. The opioid epidemic is another cause of too many lives. People are dying every day on wait lists for drug treatment. So as Attorney General, I've taken action, and I've now brought back over $500 million to Colorado, working with folks like your Commissioner Nancy Jackson in a bottom-up solution to provide more drug treatment, recovery, education, preventive services to save lives. And when I think about the work to defend consumers, we're just getting started. And we've already got $85 million back, taking on companies like CenturyLink, who promise people a price lock guarantee, but then raise prices. We got back consumers $8.4 million. And just this week, we announced money coming back from Navient, who took advantage of student borrowers. I want to talk about protecting our land, air, and water. We depend on the air and water. And we must do it the right way, which is not taking water from certain rural communities to ship it to front-range communities. It's how we do this work for all of us. Finally, protecting our reproductive rights and our civil rights. A lot of us are still shaken from a Supreme Court decision that now opens up some scary possibilities, like a 10-year-old girl who's raped, seeking to come perhaps to Colorado to get an abortion so she doesn't have to have her life further traumatized. As your Attorney General, I'll protect her. I'll protect all of our civil rights, because I'm committed to being a stronger Attorney General, a fairer Attorney General, and a wiser Attorney General. Thank you.
Questions now, let's keep it quiet, just so we can hear everything being said of these important candidates. They have given their time to all of us, so thank you for the enthusiasm, but keep it to yourself and to the very end, and I promise we'll be able to cheer for them quite a bit at the very end. Thank you for their time. Right now, let's get to our questions. Whitney and Aisha, I'll go to you. Whitney, do you want to start us off with our first category and question?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
No. Speak up and we'll work on the volume.
Stand up. All right, I'll stand. It's good to see you all. Oh, we'll all come in. So the first question, the first category, we gave the candidates the categories, but not the questions. And these questions came from you all. We wordsmithed them just a little bit. If there's any typos, that was probably from you all. So, no, we're starting with policing and criminal justice. So the first question, and I'll start with DA Weiser.
That'd be Attorney Weiser.
Attorney General Weiser. All right, here we go. Current laws provide gun immunity with unique legal immunity.
Louder. Here.
Oh, you need a mic.
Need a mic.
I can repeat the question.
Current laws provide for gun immunity. Are we hearing a mic on the audio?
Use one of the mics.
Do we have a hand?
We'll continue to work on the volume, just go ahead and give as much gusto as you can.
So the current laws provide the gun industry with unique legal immunities from many lawsuits. As a result, survivors of mass shootings in Colorado have in many cases been prevented from bringing lawsuits against the firearm industry. Recently, other states passed laws expanding victims' ability to sue the firearms industry for failing to take reasonable steps to prevent violence. Do you support legislation to expand Colorado residents' ability to sue the firearms?
Yes. I'll explain. There is no other industry that has the broad immunity of those who manufacture dangerous weapons. If you could imagine a world where those who made toys could make toys that could hurt kids and have no responsibility for what they did, well, I wouldn't want to live in that world. I want my kids to be safe. What we have seen because of the power of the gun lobby is this immunity from suit. And we've even seen efforts to stop research, public health research about gun violence. I think we're about to get some more fun. So I want to tell you how we beat the gun lobby with people engaged. We've done it here in Colorado. When people testify for that red flag law, when I testified before Senator Fields, a lot of people said, this law can't pass. People like my opponent were criticizing the law. People in the gun lobby were fighting hard against it. But when people push for gun sense legislation, when people put people first over powerful interests, we can do great things here in Colorado. We can help lead the way nationally. So absolutely, we shouldn't give one industry special and unique protection that no other industry has.
Mr. Killen?
Yep, we got microphone now, great. I disagree with Mr. Weiser in that there are no other industries that have protections or immunity from certain liability. You know, there are no manufacturers of cars that are being sued because a drunk driver has misused that car and hurt someone. So I think we have to be mindful and very respectful as well of people's Second Amendment rights. And I'll say this, I think that Mr. Weiser and I probably share the same goal in protecting our communities. In fact, that's what I do day in and day out. My view of that, though, is that we need to stringently, vigorously enforce the laws that are on the books. And I'll give you an example. You know, just last year, there was a law that changed what is called possession of a weapon by previous offender. So felons previously not allowed to possess firearms. That law was actually changed in the legislature. And it said, look, for most felonies now that you might have been convicted for, you can possess a firearm. I advocated against that because I see day in and day out the intersection of people who have committed felony offenses in the past and are then using guns illegally to commit more crimes and to hurt people in our communities. This last year, I went to the legislature and asked them to fix that. I asked them to make it a crime again for a previously convicted felon who has, let's say, stolen cars, or a previously convicted fentanyl dealer who is now able to possess a firearm, to make sure that those dangerous individuals do not have access to guns. And I was dismayed, frankly, to see that on the other side of that debate was Mr. Weiser saying he was okay with the status quo that we have now. I think that what we need to do is enforce those laws that we have on the books and frankly make sure that guns do not get in the hands of dangerous people or people who have committed crimes in the past.
Monitor, can I have a response?
We can do one of each. Go ahead, Mr. Weiser.
So I hope I don't have to do this too often, John, but there you go again, misrepresenting what happened. People can look it up. My office testified to take the same position that John pushed for. I agree. We should not allow felons to have firearms. I'm going to keep fighting that point. I fought it this past session. People can look it up. Let's have an honest difference of opinion. You don't want the gun industry to be responsible. That's your position. But don't mischaracterize mine.
Mr. Killen, legislature.
Well, I was there, and I was at the Capitol, and I was testifying for the legislature, and so I know exactly what your deputy actually did support on behalf of you and your office. And it was not to make it a crime again for previously convicted felons of aggravated motor vehicle theft and of drug distribution to possess guns. you were absolutely not on the side of that. And frankly, there is a way to look it up. It's called the internet. I'll help you out with that.
Let's move on to our second questioner's topic, please.
Thank you, Attorney General Weiser, and also District Attorney Kelman for being here and for the work that you do, specifically on behalf of survivors and victims. In 2019, Colorado enacted an extreme risk protection law, also known as the Red Flag Law, that establishes a court process for temporarily suspending a person's access to firearms for up to 1 year if they are shown to be a significant risk of harming themselves or others. In response to this law, a number of counties right here in Colorado have declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries that will not assist with enforcing this life-saving law. First off, do you support Colorado's red flag laws? And second, what is your response and plan to adopt policies to assist all counties in enforcing red flag laws?
Mr. Kellner, you're first in this one.
I actually hear about this quite a bit on the campaign trail, go across the entirety of the state, and hear people talk about, hey, we're gonna be a Second Amendment sanctuary, or we're gonna be a sanctuary city. And I always go back to my North Star, which is the rule of law. And the understanding that to live in a civil society like we have, you have to understand that the legislature makes the laws, the executive branch carries them out, the judges, the judiciary oftentimes decide what the law means in the end. But it's not right to simply say that one person can decide a county will be a Second Amendment sanctuary. They don't have that authority to do that. I've talked to people from my own party about that and made sure that they understand that that is not what the rule of law truly demands. And I think it's really important, as the Attorney General for the state of Colorado, that people do understand how the red flag law works. And in a community like this, you know, we just passed 10 years since the Aurora Theater massacre. I'm often asked that question, what would you do? And I have to say this truthfully. Look, if I knew that there was a man with orange hair who was threatening to kill a crowd full of people in my community, and I had some way to prevent that from happening, you're darn right I'd use that tool. Because I'm committed to keeping people safe. Now, we can improve on that law. It can probably be refined around the edges. There are certainly some issues with it. But the fact of the matter remains that it is a tool that can be used and is used in this district and across the state to keep people safe.
Mr. Redd?
I do support the red flag law. I pushed hard for it. And at the time I was pushing hard for it, John was on the Jimmy Sensenbrenner show criticizing the law. This law has saved lives. We actually expanded this law and set up a protection order system for victims of domestic violence, because there used to be something called the boyfriend loophole, where the old law only applied to married couples. And I fought to get that changed, and unfortunately not a single Republican stepped up to join in that effort. We have to fight hard to protect people and keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, whether batterers or those where the red flag law can make a difference and save lives. And so in encouraging compliance with the law, as Attorney General, I'm someone who deeply believes in it. Not a critic of it, but a strong supporter. We put together a report in our office outlining every single case of this red flag law to explain how it was used. We're responsible for training police officers on how to use this law. And what we're seeing is changing hearts and minds. Of those 32 counties who said they wouldn't use it, with work from myself and others, 20 of them use this tool. And I've had a lot of conversations around the state about how this law can make a difference, and people have told me, you know, I wasn't sure initially, but now I'm a supporter. So this red flag law is a great success of how we solve problems together in Colorado, and I'm really proud of the work we've done.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser. I'll go back to our moderators for our next section.
Thank you so much. The next category is healthcare and equity. Colorado passed the Reproductive Health Equity Act earlier this year, which puts the fundamental right to abortion into Colorado state law. Will both of you pledge to defend the Reproductive Health Equity Act if challenged in court? And how will you protect patients and providers from legal action in other states?
Mr. Weiser, your first up.
Let me offer you a series of pledges on this. First, I will enforce this law, and if any county, as one has already threatened, tries to pass an ordinance prohibiting access to abortion care, I've told any county I will take them on in court to enforce this law, number one. Number two, if any other state tries to criminalize a patient or a doctor here in Colorado, I will be fighting to protect Colorado's law and patients and doctors who are here in our state. And finally, if there's a movement to overturn this law, I'm committed to fighting against that. I was trained by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the concept of equal protection of the laws and reproductive health care whose decisions should be made by women is something that is deeply in my commitment, bless you as well. And I will continue to fight hard to protect reproductive rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser. Mr. Kilmer.
So I understand that people have a lot of concern after the Dobbs decision, especially in Colorado, and wondering what is the future of the Reproductive Health Equity Act, and what does that mean for people in our state. You know, as somebody who has given this a lot of thought, I understand that people have very deeply held emotions, very personal opinions about this that are oftentimes rooted in their religion, their sense of morality, very personal decisions that they may have to make. And as somebody who supports the Dobbs decision returning this back to the states to make a decision, it's also important to recognize that Colorado, through its legislature, has spoken on the issue. And frankly, the people have spoken on this issue multiple times at the ballot box as well. And they have passed this law. And as the Attorney General, I can commit to you in much the same way that Mr. Weiser did, that I will defend the law. One of the things that I mentioned earlier about the rule of law being my North Star is that I'm not picking and choosing winners and losers in the AG's office. I'm not making policy decisions based off of my personal beliefs. My job is to defend the law that's been passed, and I will do that. And as I've heard people suggest that they might criminalize the travel, the free travel of free people in our United States, first and foremost, folks, I'm an American, I'm a patriot, and the Constitution guarantees people that right to travel among our states. So if someone comes to Colorado seeking an abortion, they're protected in our state. And no other state can reach in and say, look, we're going to tell you, Colorado, what to do. I will fight that as well. Now, I have personal feelings and thoughts about that subject of abortion. My wife and I, we've had that discussion. We've resolved that we would never choose to abort a baby. That's my personal choice, and I recognize that's my life circumstance. And I'm not running for AG to impose my views on other people in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Kilmer. Let's go back to our moderators for our next question on healthcare.
Final question in the healthcare category. We all know that we have an opioid epidemic, and we cannot police ourselves out of the opioid epidemic. Can you please talk to us how you will address the opioid epidemic in light of the new legislation that has just come forth? And what is your plan to make sure people have access to mental and behavioral health and substance abuse programs?
Mr. Kilmer.
Can I have more than 3 minutes, 2 minutes? We can go on for a long time about this because the opioid epidemic truly is devastating our communities, and we're in what's called the third wave of that right now, with fentanyl flooding our communities and killing and hurting people. You know, just last year alone, I think Colorado lost well over 900 people to the fentanyl overdose crisis. In this district, as your district attorney, I've taken on the drug cartels that are importing this poison to our communities and killing people. A few months ago, I announced an indictment, an allegation, of course, over 20 people involved in a drug trafficking organization with over 110,000 fentanyl pills seized, over 24 firearms seized from this group, and 4 hand grenades, mind you. So consider the potential for violence around that drug trade. Just a few weeks ago, we announced another indictment of a large drug trafficking organization. These people are flooding our communities. In that one, we seized over 200,000 pills, not just destined for this community, where the DEA estimates about 40% of those pills are lethal, but also destined for the rest of the country. So I am committed to using every tool in my toolbox as a prosecutor and as a crime fighter to fight the people who are currently fueling this opioid crisis. Now, on the topic of rehabilitation and treatment, in my office, I drove here, down Peoria and then under Chambers, and went right by our diversion office. Something that I opened up in this community to make sure that people that are struggling with addiction, who are truly users and addicts, have an off-ramp from the criminal justice system, that they can go get treatment, engage with that, and then their case would be dismissed in its entirety. Because there's two very different, paths that are happening here. We've got folks who are struggling with addiction that need help. And thankfully, the bill that was passed provides a lot more resources to do that. But then we also need to be realistic about where this poison is coming from and how it is getting here. And then we need a crime fighter, somebody like me, to actually tackle it on a statewide basis, because what I am doing here in the 18th Judicial District is not enough. We need statewide enforcement using the statewide grand jury to crack down on these cartels.
Mr. Westbrook.
5 years ago, with my daughter, who's here tonight, I visited Robert Jackson, the sheriff in Alamosa County. Robert told me something many of you have heard and has been reported later by CPR. 90% of people in that jail, and Robert tells me it's true today, are struggling with opioid addiction. And Robert said, I can't help them. They're here going through detox. And when people leave jail after withdrawing, they're 130 times more likely than the average person to overdose. That's what happened to Keith, whose mom Tricia talked to me about this terrible epidemic. I was here 4 years ago debating John's mentor and predecessor, George Brauchler, who said it would be irresponsible as an attorney general to take on Big Pharma for their role in the opioid crisis. I said it would be irresponsible not to take them on. Just a month or so later, Cynthia Kaufman, my predecessor, brought a lawsuit against Purdue Pharma. I had the Sackler family and a whole bunch of others, including some we announced this week. We're bringing back over $500 million to Colorado to address this crisis. Big Pharma started this in the boardroom. They're now going to help Colorado at a grassroots level. Talk to Commissioner Nancy Jackson about some of that work. All around the state, there's now hope and opportunities. Just last week, I heard about the San Luis Valley having a first ever treatment center coming right out of this work. This week, I heard about one in southwest Colorado, parts of our state without treatment. As I said earlier, people are dying on wait lists for treatment. We have about 25% of what we need. So as your Attorney General, I have delivered on this, and I want another term to see this work through, to build the treatment, recovery, education, prevention we need. And I also have taken on drug cartels in cases working with Adams County and push for more resources to do interdiction. But as Maisha noted in the question, that's not going to be enough. We can't arrest our way out of this crisis. We also need to give people pathways to recovery, to treatment. And I've done it.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser. For a rebuttal.
I'd like to talk about those settlement dollars that Mr. Weiser is telling you about. It's something around $400 million over the course of 18 years that's coming back to our communities. And I just went through the Western Slope over the last couple of days, and I'm talking to people in those communities who are telling me the money they're getting is not what they expected, it's not as much, and it's not going to move the needle in the way that we truly need to. It sounds like a lot of money, $400 million, but put that in the context of your state budget, that's about 1% of the annual budget, and that money is coming to Colorado over the course of 18 years. And I told Phil this in our last forum, that is simply not enough. That was not enough to truly address the harm caused by those big pharma folks in the boardroom that you say you want to hold accountable. Because there are about 9,000 deaths attributed to opioids in this state, and tens of thousands of people hopelessly addicted. That money is not going to go far enough, and that is not true accountability. And I ask myself, why? Why would you settle for that amount? And I know the answer, and I think, Phil, you should talk about this because you are the head of a group called the Attorney General Alliance. You are the chair of that group. That group is funded by those same big pharma companies taking hundreds of thousands of dollars for Weiser and his staff and other people to go to Hawaii for a conference. And just a few short weeks after that, getting the access to Mr. Weiser with lobbyists, they announced this settlement. That is something he needs to answer for, because from where I sit, that doesn't look right, doesn't sound right.
Mr. Weiser? So when you run for office, you have to decide what type of campaign you're gonna run. Is it one about dealing on the substance, doing your homework, addressing what concerns people, or making baseless attacks in the mud? Exhibit A. Here's the attack that John just said, that a group that I lead, that I had my predecessor lead, and John Southers and Ken Salazar, has conferences. And because they take money for conferences, I compromise the interests of the people of Colorado. That's an outrageous attack. Moreover, the settlements that I've gotten now up to $500 million are multi-state settlements. Had John done his homework, he would have the first idea about how these settlements work. They weren't only up to me. I was working with 51 other states. John suggesting he can get more money, also suggesting he do his homework, because no state got more money. And then if you talk to other attorneys general, what they'll tell you is my leadership helped bring McKinsey to account. Having McKinsey having to share their documents, pay $600 million in a nationwide settlement. We also played a leading role in Johnson & Johnson. Now I know John Kellner spent no time practicing consumer protection law. So he clearly has more homework to do.
I think there's only one person on this stage that can commit to you as the Attorney General that I will not be taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from the same companies that I am actively suing. And apparently that is something that Mr. Weiser cannot commit to you.
Well, let me respond to that.
Mr. Weiser, go ahead.
Yeah, so John has a choice because there may well be money spent by a group called the Republican Attorneys General Association. And I just want to make the contrast here. He's talking about the Attorney General Alliance, a bipartisan organization where my mission is to encourage bipartisan collaboration. The Republican Attorney General Association takes money from Purdue Pharma and others to take dark money attack ads. Are you saying you won't go to their conferences?
Are you saying you won't answer that question?
Let's move on, gentlemen. Thank you. We've spent quite enough time on that question. Remind everybody, let's make it so we can hear the canvas clearly. Let's go to our moderators for our next section and question. Thank you.
Next category, there we go. All right, is crime in Colorado, and this will be for Attorney General Weiser. Colorado is experiencing one of the highest rates of automobile thefts in the country. In 2021, on average, over 700 vehicles per week were stolen in Colorado. What specific policies do you believe best address this growing epidemic?
The job of the Attorney General is to work on organized criminal activity that's multi-jurisdictional. And we've done that, bringing multiple cases, like our call hauler case or Operation Vicious Cycle, going after those stealing cars in an organized criminal way. The frontline prosecution of car theft is what district attorneys do. And there we provide backup support where they need help, like we're doing in the San Luis Valley. On the legislature, we've worked on solutions like cutting down the market for catalytic converter theft, passing laws. And we also train police
helping them do their work better. The bottom line is, we're gonna need collaboration, learning from what works, seeing what doesn't work, and working together to hold people accountable who are stealing these cars and to protect people. In fact, last week, someone tried to steal our car. And so this is a clearly widespread challenge that we have to work on together, and we're gonna solve it by looking